big idea here is to turn up our emotional intelligence wherever it's at. We want to turn that dial and turn it up for whoever's watching. And I'm going to try to give you the most simple overview of the things that I focus on when I'm trying to help individuals or organizations turn up their emotional intelligence. And the big idea that we start with is that there's a decision ahead of time. But before I even have an interaction, I want to decide ahead of time how I want to be. This is what a lot of successful sports teams do. My son is a United States Marine. They always go in with a plan, right? And as a matter of fact, they have about 4 or 5 different backup plans if that plan, something goes awry. With human beings, sometimes we think we're just going to be there and be reactive and sort of hang back and see what happens. The most emotionally intelligent people that I know and the most successful people at having positive interactions with other human beings are the ones who decide ahead of time, this is how I'm going to be. And it might be a good idea to even scribble some thoughts down. How do I want to present to the other human beings that I'm interacting with, however that is? And we'll hear things like, I want to be respectful. No matter what, I want to stay respectful. I want to stay empathetic, particularly if we're going through a crisis. Empathy is one of those skills. And working for the Love and Logic Institute, I never thought of empathy as a skill. I thought of it as just something you either feel or you don't feel. But it turns out that conveying of sincere empathy is a really powerful skill, making people feel important and heard and valued, and especially if they're in pain, that we're rejoicing when they rejoice and we're mourning when they mourn. We're feeling it with them. And that validation of those feelings, really great thing for especially leaders and people who lead teams to be able to do. Too many times when we get our feelings hurt, part of the feeling is they didn't consider me. They didn't consider my feelings. So we're considering the other party or parties ahead of time before we even start that interaction. And then we move. I say start with self-awareness. That's really not true. We've already started with the decision. The next step is self-awareness. Me. What's going on with me? Am I hangry today? Am I tired? Am I in a bad mood? And I always recommend for interpersonal relationship stuff, talk to a lot of parents. Let's not have these important discussions when one of us is tired, hungry, upset about something else. It's tough for parents because sometimes we don't have as much control over that timing as we would like. If I'm a boss, hopefully I do.
Right.
When am I going to have this conversation that might be difficult? I want to make sure that I'm in a good space. I want to make sure that I have my thoughts together. That if nothing else, I'm not upset about something else. So many times when I deal with an upset person, I realize it's something that happened some other time and in some other place and involves some other person. And that's the wrath that I'm getting from this person right now. It doesn't even have a whole lot to do with me. Or at least I like to think that way.
Yeah, and I'll just add too, when we talk about that empathy, we learned that in our cultural keynote yesterday and from our business process, that we look at across the aisle within business and have that ability to come together in communication, to have empathy for, oh, this system is really hard for this person in accounting versus the experience of the person in marketing, because obviously that's my favorite department, as I said yesterday. But I think that empathy is really, really valuable to understand, especially when implementing a new technology and understanding the pain points of business processes.
And when we talk about empathy as a skill, we have to make sure that we're sincere there. The worst thing in the world is insincere empathy. When someone says, I know just how you feel. No, you don't. It's actually the effort that we take to put ourselves in that other person's shoes. So I know just how you feel is the worst thing to say if I'm trying to convey empathy. What I might say instead is something like, help me understand. I want to make sure I understand. It's the effort that we take to put ourselves in those shoes. My grandma used to say, before you judge somebody, you should walk a mile in their shoes.
Yeah.
Because if they're mad at you for judging them, you've got a mile head start on them and you've got their shoes. So she was a smart lady. Yeah. She was a smart lady. Next, we would talk about staying interested in that other person. So again, emotionally intelligent people are able to make the other party feel I'm interested in you. And in this age, unfortunately, make the joke that we're often left to our own devices. You know what kind of devices? Right? So too many times I'm actually doing the opposite. I'm saying, yeah, I'm listening to you. And I'm sending a message that says, I'm not interested in you. With parents again, and I teach this to teachers and anybody who works with people, to do the exact opposite, to have something that you're focused on. And then when it's time to talk to that person, you actually put that thing away. I had a boss who did this. This is back in the olden days. My office was just down the hall from her. And she was basically like the principal of the school. So when kids came to see her, she'd have her door open and she would call me when kids were on the way, just so she could hang up on me, right? She would call my office phone 20 feet away. And as soon as the kids showed up in her doorway, she'd say, oh, a really important conversation I have to have. And she would hang up on me and she would turn and she would make that kid feel like the most important person in the world. She was that level of intentional. Of course, it was terrible for my self-esteem, but it was great for the kids in terms of making them feel important. Absolutely. And so that's just a little trick. If people feel like you don't ever listen to them, if you've ever gotten that complaint from a friend or a spouse or coworker, do the opposite of what most people do. Is you start talking and start looking at my device. Be on the device. That's easy. Most of us can do that one. And then put it away and physically turn and engage that person so that you're not just interested, but you're showing the interest. And so many times I'm like, well, I can do this. I can multitask. But to how we make that person feel, again, there's an intentionality. All your audience is used to hearing me say, intentionality wins the day. That's a level of intentionality most people don't have. I'm going to have this thing. And back in the day with my boss, she would be scribbling on something. And if I came to talk to her, she would put it down, she would put it away, and she would physically turn to lock her eyes on me. And again, I always felt like the most important person or part of her day.
Absolutely. And when we talk about this interest, when it comes to digital transformation, we talk a lot about that contract, right, between the sponsor and the end user. And how we know that user adoption, at the end of the day, if your people aren't using that technology, that's affecting things like ROI, that's affecting revenue. And if you are not, as a leader or a change practitioner, interested in their overall experience for software selection, for understanding any pain points within this new technology, or even understanding any fear built around new technologies, automation, then if you're not totally interested in that conversation, their value level within the organization really decreases. And that's when we start to see really rippling effects within the overall business infrastructure.
Such a good point. And here's another little tip. Never go on and talk about emotional intelligence with someone who's better at it than you. That's always embarrassing. If you've ever been, and we were just talking about AI and things, if you've ever been on you've gotten a hold message, and it's a robot voice saying, your call is important to us, right? Your call is important to us. And how important do you actually feel a lot of times? And again, some of this hits close to home because I've worked for businesses and we had some kind of a message like that. I want to make people feel basically the opposite. Anything that's ever made you feel unimportant, like whether you're the end user or not, if it's made you feel like, yeah, we're just rushing over your importance very quickly, we want to do the opposite. And a lot of times it's that extra time, that extra second. If I'm listening to a conversation, it's that extra beat. Instead of quickly chiming in my thoughts that I've been thinking about, I'm going to blurt this out the first moment of dead air I get. That extra beat that says, I'm really listening, I'm really absorbing this stuff. And even that could be a very intentional thing. In a meeting or in a conversation or on a Zoom, before I blurt out my answer, I'm going to take that one extra beat, that one extra second, and then really there's a thoughtfulness to my answers rather than just, oh, this is what I was thinking while you were talking.
Right, absolutely. And we talked yesterday about that recent video I did that said, stop saying automation. Because when you go into, a manufacturing floor that it employs 50 people and you start saying, I'm going to automate this, I'm going to automate that. And the people that's their job. That's what they do on a day-to-day basis. And you're not being intentional as a business leader to say, even though that's going to be automated, Jed, this is the A, B, and C, D role you're going to move into and the opportunity to expand your value within the business.
Yeah, we don't want to speed right past the person aspect and how we make those people feel. It's a perfect example of, yeah, if I'm around people and I'm talking about all the systems that are going to do all the things that we need done, and I completely pass right by the people aspect, how are those people going to feel? Even if, and many times it's pretty exciting. I mean, I've worked with companies where they worried, oh, I'm going to lose my job because I don't know how to do this thing, and now they have technology that's going to do this thing. And it turns out, no, they have a new role and they love it. And it's so much more stress-free, or maybe not stress-free, but it's less stress. And all that anxiety, we'll talk a little bit later about, I have some thoughts on anxiety, especially when we're going through change. All that anxiety was unwarranted. But if I'm the person delivering the message, whether I'm a leader or not, if I'm delivering a message, I want to be cognizant of how I'm making the other person feel, because we remember how things make us feel. Right? We remember how people
absolutely
make us feel. There's restaurants with really good food that I won't go back to because of how they made me feel. There's also places with average coffee that I can't wait to go to because of how they make me feel like the most important customer they've ever had.
Absolutely, and that customer impact is really what we're going for in a digital transformation, to view ROI or anything like that. So if you do have feedback or experience, I know we have a lot of HR professionals, change practitioners, a lot of people within this community. We definitely want to have that collaborative conversation. So we're going to go through a few slides here, and then I'd love to hear from you in the comments and give Jed, who's our emotional intelligence expert, works with this all over the entire country with here in the States. So definitely a great opportunity to ask some change questions.
Let's look at that next slide. And once again, we're deciding all of this ahead of time. And this is just two examples of, and again, I've seen this with who I deem as the most successful communicators when it comes to emotional intelligence. There's a couple things that they definitely do. And one is, if you've ever been maybe listened to a speech by a politician and they turned you off in about 2 seconds, a lot of times it's a lack of authenticity. You're saying, you don't really mean this, you don't really believe this, you're trying to tell me what I want to hear. Salespeople are notorious for this, right? Salespeople are notorious for things that sound too much like a technique. Kyler, when I was Kyler, and Kyler, and it's like, oh, they've gotten the mention of my name 6 times, and that, and they learned that in some seminar. And you can just tell. And as human beings, we actually don't like it when people use techniques on us. As we sit here talking about skills that are going to make us better at this, it's okay, I think, to use skills in terms of, I'm not going to just wait and see how it goes. I'm going to be more intentional. At the same time, I do not want to come across as that insincere, fake, technique-y. Oh, sure. And I've worked with people like this too. They put their work voice on, and they use some of their work terms, and you're not really like that. So ahead of time, I'm going to decide to be authentic. And again, I think this is for leaders, but it's for anybody. And I'm going to have respectful engagement. I'm going to have respectful communication. And usually we do better when we make a commitment with ourselves that we're going to do that ahead of time. We don't do as well in the heat of the moment going, oh yeah, be respectful, right? I've got to decide ahead of time. This is where I'm going to be. And as Eric and I talked about the weather, we are kind of making the weather then a little bit. We're sort of setting the tone. And it's amazing how often a conversation that may have been a difficult conversation can stay respectful because one person set the pace for that conversation.
Absolutely. And I know Sam over here is saying, a useful reminder is ERP is not computers, it's a people system. And that's so true. And especially when we talk about our vendor partners and the authenticity within that sales process and that professional skepticism that Eric talked about this morning, and just understanding the authenticity that goes into that process and asking those right questions and communicating with your front lines. What are the processes that we need to be able to, integrate within this system? authentically, not, we're getting a new system and it's going to be the best thing on earth. We're going through a change to benefit the business. So thank you, Sam, for that comment. That's a great one.
And to benefit humanity, hopefully, we'll have a bigger benefit. What a great quote. ERP is not a computer system, it's a people system that just happens to run on computers. I love the way Sam says it. I might steal that if it's okay.
Yeah, well,
I guess
Sam,
if he says it's okay, then it's not stealing.
Yeah. Sam is a guest blogger for us and a great partner, and we're going to need you to put that in Spanish, as we always need you to do, Sam, because he's over in Spain. So
I could try. My Spanish
okay.
is rudimentary, but I would probably blow it. But that's just what a great quote. It's the tools that we use change over time. We're literally doing things now that we used to do with sticks, right? But we're still human beings working toward a goal, and no matter what the company is, the company's still made up of people. He says it's free.
Always a consultant.
But we can pay if we wish. Yeah, that's thinking like a consultant. That's thinking like a good consultant.
Exactly.
So the other thing we're deciding ahead of time is how we're going to listen. We're going to and this takes effort.
Mm-hmm.
This is bad. And you're a parent, you know this. It takes effort to listen to my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I feel like I spend too much time listening to them, but to make them feel heard is, again, we're meeting powerful human needs. So this gets down to like base needs that all people have, food, water, shelter, Netflix, just the basic things that we survive on. Being heard is actually a powerful human need. Having our voice reach someone, it's literally a need. We can absolutely drive ourselves mad if we don't feel like anyone hears us. And if you think about the need to be noticed or the need to be heard, how powerful is that in social media?
Absolutely, sure.
Many people get on Facebook and the whole thing is, I want everybody to hear my voice or, see my cat or whatever it is. So we make a decision ahead of time that we're going to meet this powerful human need that people have to be heard and to feel validated, to feel important, feel significant. We're going to meet it and we decide ahead of time, I'm going to tune in and I'm not just going to listen to understand. There's the whole paraphrasing thing.
Yeah.
I've seen this and I've worked with a lot of therapists.
Sure.
So, wait, don't take that the wrong way. I've worked professionally with a lot of therapists. They have the temptation is to parrot back what the person just said. I hear you saying the temptation is to parrot back what the person just said. That's a terrible way to make someone feel heard. It is much better if I can paraphrase. I've pulled out the meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so you're saying it's really important as human beings that we feel heard. Paraphrase instead of parrot. So that's the listen to understand part. But even more important, what do people remember? How we make them feel. We are listening. And by the way, does listening occur over email? Yes, I know some terrible listeners, meaning I sent them an email. I asked 2 really specific questions, and they kind of answered one. I'm sure this has never happened to anyone else. They kind of answered one of the questions, completely ignored the other question, or just chose not to answer. More likely, they read it really fast, and they didn't, just like a good listener, sift through and see what the meaning is. And I'm trying to determine what's important to the asker, right? What's important to them, and make sure that I, if I can, make them feel understood and give them the answer. On top of that, sometimes we're just venting, right? As human beings, we're just venting. And it's pretty important. This is pretty important in relationships. Make that person feel heard, feel understood. Because we're going to remember how they made us feel.
Absolutely. And we talk about this with our change practitioners that we often call organizational change management consultants, therapists, because they really are, their job is to go into the business, listen to all of the feedback, and understand how to build out that change plan. And as we were kind of talking about yesterday, that's the insurance to make sure that your digital transformation is successful. This right here may seem like a very easy, common sense piece, but if you're not listening to the team and listening to what they need in order to make that user adoption level increase, then there's going to be disruption within your business, whether that's the customers impacted, we have disruption in our distribution, or we're a loss of revenue. This is really that receptive listening skill that needs to be cultivated within that process.
If you are a change manager or a therapist,
Right.
you've got to be a great listener. You have to be a great listener. And I think one of the barriers to that is impatience. So we have a very hurried and impatient society right now compared to even 20, 30, 40 years ago. We want to put everything in the microwave. My son, so I have a son, he's a big guy and likes to eat. The microwave is not fast enough for him. He will literally tap his foot. He'll stand in front of the microwave, tapping his foot, like, come on, not realizing how incredibly fast that is. So we want to put everything in the microwave. We want it now. We don't want to wait. And I think the best listeners tend to be more patient people. But this takes effort. It doesn't come naturally for a lot of us. We have to work at it. That extra time to hear versus I know something to say, and we want to blurt it real fast. So once again, if I'm working on this as a skill, just an emotional intelligence skill, take a couple more seconds, breathe. The world's probably not going to stop spinning if you don't get your genius comment out there. The other thing it does for me is it helps me a little bit more time, helps me filter a little better. So maybe my answer that was going to be insensitive or inappropriate or unintelligent, I have all kinds of thoughts like that, right? If I take a little extra time before I answer, the person's feeling heard, they're feeling more understood, and then my answer is probably going to be better. People have some rules about emails and texts. Maybe you don't return it, or you don't hit send at least for a certain amount of time.
Oh, sure.
At one point, I wanted to develop an app that was like
that's a good idea.
That when you're texting,
be careful. This is technology.
Oh yeah, someone can steal this just like we steal Sam's great quote. But it actually pauses and doesn't send for a period of time so that you don't go, ooh, you know what? I didn't think that all the way through before I sent it. Great listeners. You can't be in a rush. You can't be going, and I realize there are those people who don't get to the point, or they are not good at straining for just the facts and the important information that we might need in our business. But it's still better, I think, in the long run to make sure those people don't feel unimportant and like what they have to say is not valued.
Yeah, and we talked yesterday in the culture presentation about that feedback route and being intentional about that. And this is where we really can take the model of business process management development. We map out our manufacturing process. We map out our supply chain. We should also be mapping out how we make sure that there is a feedback loop within our digital transformation projects. Because again, that is our investment to make sure that awesome process that we just established is actually being used by our people, our technology, and our processes.
So, and it is so timely. We got another great comment from Sam. He said, it took me a long time to realize that even when I am right, the people who disagree with me are not necessarily wrong.
Sam should write a book.
I know. I'm going to need to go to Spain and hang out with this guy because I like the way he thinks a lot. It's funny because I wanted to talk a little bit about disagreement versus conflict. I don't have a slide for this, but I have some thoughts on, because this is inevitably going to happen. If we're going through change, certain things are inevitable. Some anxiety, some people are going to be excited, some people are going to be fearful. And also disagreement. Disagreement is inevitable. And one of my first times talking to Eric, we talked about this, that disagreement is good. I've read up on the Wright brothers.
Yep.
And it turns out that they loved to spar and argue, and they would have some pretty powerful disagreements, but they got us up in the air.
Yeah, they did.
And if they never, there's no way they woke up, even though they were brothers with this very common goal, there's no way they woke up every day on the same page. At one point, one of them had to say, no, that's not the right way. No, that's not the right way. They were able to figure all that out enough, again, to get up in the air. So we need to not fear that disagreement part. It's conflict, which I know someone who defines it as disagreement with negative emotions, right?
Okay.
Conflict is disagreement, and we've added in a sprinkle or a big dash of negative emotion. And so an emotionally intelligent person has the ability to manage their negative emotions and hopefully disagree more respectfully and ultimately productively, there's always going to be more than one idea
Mhm.
coming to the table. That's good.
Mhm.
And if I have a company, I don't want 100 people who all think exactly the same
Oh,
way. And I
sure.
definitely don't want 100 people who all think like me. That would be actually terrifying. But we have to be able to take a second, and I think there's some ego thing here.
Mhm.
Take a second and say, okay, here's a different perspective. Do I have to view that as a threat coming into my little ego world? Or can I really listen to it, decide the merits of it, and can we discuss, even if we have differing or even opposing ideas,
Mhm.
can we leave out the negative emotion? That's a sign of a healthy company.
Yeah,
We can
absolutely.
disagree and we're still buddies, we're still getting along and have a productive work relationship versus what a scary thing. Any sign or hint of disagreement and people turn on each other and get nasty. And now it's not that there's too much of this in our society right now. You're a bad person. It's not that you have a different view of this. I have to feel like I'm a better human being than you. And that means you have to be a terrible human being.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely well said. And then obviously this is a great quote. Maybe Sam wrote it. I don't know, but
Yeah, we'll change the name at the bottom there. I was thinking about when an organization is going through a transformation or any change, any upheaval, and it could be just what's going on in the economy, or it could be we're making changes here internally. I can kind of choose, if I'm intentional about it, I can kind of choose between some level of optimism, and I don't want to be the unrealistic
Mhm.
Pollyanna, pie in the sky, ridiculous people. Those people actually kind of annoy me, I must admit. The person who thinks everything's great no matter what. I think there was a Simpsons years ago, and it was the halftime show, and it was supposed to be like up with people, they're happy, and they called it "Hooray for Everything." So in my mind, I'm always, oh, this is a hooray for everything person. And I've been accused of being that guy because I tend to be pretty upbeat and pretty positive, pretty optimistic. But we have this choice between some level of optimism and some level of pessimism and or anxiety,
Mhm.
because we don't know how it's really going to go.
Right.
We think we have a pretty good picture of how it's going to go, or maybe it's completely unknown, and then that's more anxiety, right? It's scarier. But the idea of this quote, and I've said this to people over the years, and then I saw the quote, and I was like, this sums it up better than I've been able to. Either way, we have to imagine this thing that hasn't happened yet. If I'm wondering how this is going to go, and I'm either worried about it or optimistic about it, either way, I'm imagining an outcome. And if I have that ability to worry and imagine this terrible future, it means I have an equal ability to imagine this going great. Imagine a better outcome. Why not? Since fear, we know, paralyzes our thinking.
Mhm.
It makes us all less productive human beings. Why not, if I have the ability to choose to a degree, why not choose the better imagined outcome, right? Why not choose the optimistic outcome? Again, I like working with optimistic people because once in a while, I think the only reward of being a pessimist is that sometimes you're right. And then you get to go, see, I told you that wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
ERP, schmearp, see? And you get to be right and maybe pat yourself on the back for a second. But when you're an optimist, I think you put yourself and the people around you in a way more productive state. And I don't think I said this when I was on with Eric, but I read different biographies of athletes that were really successful.
Mhm.
Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Wayne Gretzky, a whole bunch of others. And they all had, one of the things they had in common is they believed they were going to win. They believed they were going to make
Sure.
the shot. They believed it was going to go in. They believed they were good and that they were going to succeed. And I don't think that's a coincidence. If Michael Jordan shot every free throw going, I'm not very good. This is probably going to miss. He probably doesn't make nearly as many shots.